Well, good morning. As Pastor Greg said, 19 years ago, I joined Hope International. That is what I do with my day job. 18 years ago, I came here for the very first time. And for the last 18 years, this group of people, you have been walking with Hope International, and it has been an absolute joy. Not just the church partnership, but really the friendships. I have so much respect for your pastor, for his family, the way that he has been a pastor to you. He has been a pastor from a little bit of a distance to me, and it is not uncommon for me to be listening in to the sermons, listening in to your services from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. So I am so grateful for the friendships. I am so grateful for this church, and a church that takes seriously this call, this invitation to say, what does it look like for us to love God, to love our neighbor, and then to extend our gaze beyond just the walls here, beyond this community, and say, what does it look like for us to love fully, to love well? And for the last 18 years, you've been doing that with Hope International, connecting you to churches and families all around the world. And I know for some of you, maybe this is the first time. It's been a few years since I've been here, but maybe just a little bit more of a word about what is this partnership? What is it that we're doing together? And really, it's designed to be a partnership that says there are unbelievable needs around the world that we are, because of our geography, a little bit far away from. But around the world, there are 689 million individuals that live in extreme poverty. That means less than $2.15 a day. And what that actually means is there are unimaginable, unbearable choices that on a day-to-day basis, individuals, families are making today. But there's a question that is not an unbearable choice, and that is a question for the church to say, do we see, do we turn away, or do we respond? And I love that I am part of a global movement, a global church that says, yes, those needs are real, but so is our invitation to show up. And so for the last number of years, 18 years, we've been showing up in these communities, sharing the hope of the gospel as we proclaim the good news of Jesus and help families work their way out of poverty. Is an innovative approach that instead of just providing short-term aid, figures out how do we unleash, how do we equip, how do we unlock that potential. And you just saw the story of Marie and Daniel, and even though those are told as illustrations, I assure you those are not illustrations. I actually got to meet Marie. I got to hear her story. I got to see her sewing machine that she had purchased. I got to see her joy as she now is providing for her family. I got to see her church that is on the move, loving their community, and today meeting and proclaiming the good news of Jesus. I love that I get to be part of that sort of a work, that sort of a mission. And if you want to hear more about Hope International, if you want to learn more about our microfinance approach or our church-centered savings groups, I would love to have that conversation. It is a privilege and joy to do this work and to be part of a global movement. You know, at Hope International, maybe this is a little bit of a peculiar thing, but every single time that we have a meeting, we don't start out with good morning. If it's 8 a.m. here for a meeting, we always start out with good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Because around the world, we're connected, and I, on a day-to-day basis, get to experience that joy of being part of a global movement, a global church. And I hope at the end of today, at the end of our few minutes, we might be entering into just a little bit more of that joy, that privilege of being part of a global church. But today, I want to share just three what-if statements that I believe would have a radical transformation on our churches and on our world. So are you ready? 3 what-if statements. So the first what-if statements, what would happen if? What would happen if we as a church rediscovered our global mission? Now, the reason I want to start with that is because there is a question that I get asked perhaps more than any other. And it's a question not about, so tell me about how the model actually works. Tell me about the way. Tell me why you believe so passionately about a holistic impact. Or tell me how you offer investments into entrepreneurs with no collateral and you get 98% repaid. Those are not the questions that I get more than any other. The question that I get more than any other is this. Peter, there are so many needs around us. Why care about needs around the world? That is the question that I get asked more than any other. And it's not exactly a short answer. And originally, I would talk about the needs around the world. I would talk about what extreme poverty really looks like, or I would talk about my personal experiences of being with families that are making unimaginable choices. And those are all true. Those still I love to talk about because there are incredible needs around the world. But I think today I want to go a different direction. I want to go to a deeper reason why I believe we're invited in. And I think the answer is because we serve a God who has always had a global vision and has always been inviting us in. Now, we see this mission from the beginning to the end. If you open up your Bible in the opening chapters, you see that there was an initial call. It was an incredible call, and it was a call to Abraham, and he received this call, and it came with a promise. And what was the promise that came with this call of Abraham? It was this. It was that all people on earth will be blessed through you. He said, Abraham, you're going to be blessed, but this blessing is not just for you. It's not just for your family. It's not just for your community. It's not just for your people. This mission that I'm inviting into you is going to be a blessing that will be for the whole world. This is a theme that we see in the beginning of our Bible, but we see it at the very end. At the very end, we have this picture in Revelation that the final chapter is going to be an unimaginable party. There is going to be a party of all parties. There's going to be a celebration, and it's going to be a great multitude that no one can count. And where is this group gathering from? Every nation, tribe, people, and language standing before the throne and in front of the Lamb. If heaven is going to be a global celebration, why would we want to wait to participate in that? Why not start now? I've had the joy of participating in church, experiencing this joy around the world. And I love that there are all different types, all different expressions of worshiping Jesus. But one time I was living in Rwanda, and while I was there, I think they recognized that, there was a dance party. That church was a lot of movement. It was people dancing. And I was given the nickname Mzungu Chane Chane, that means the whitest of the white man. So when we get to that great celebration, when we get to that party, I'm going to be in the sway category. I'm not going to be in the full dance category, but it is going to be a global celebration. Every tribe, every nation, every people worshiping before the throne. I love that is the beginning of the story, that is the end of the story, and it is woven throughout, that we serve a God who has a heart for all people, all nations. And Jesus was not ambiguous in his heart for all nations either. We see in the Great Commission in Matthew 28, what is it? Go and make disciples. Where? Where are we to go? All nations. And then on in Acts 1:8, there's even more instructions. And you think that Jesus would save really important instructions as he's going to return to the Father. In Acts 1:8, he says this, he says, you will be my witnesses. Where? In Jerusalem, in all Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. Now, when Jesus issued this command, where were the individuals? They were in where? They were in Jerusalem. That's where they were. But he says it's not just Jerusalem, it's also Judea. So it would be similar to saying, if Jesus were here, he would say, for you today, reach the people of Kennett Square. Don't let this environment miss out on the good news of Jesus. Be my witnesses in Kennett Square and in Pennsylvania and in the United States. He says, be my witnesses in the place that you are, but don't just be my witnesses there. Take this good news. After Jerusalem, after Judea, Jesus had Samaria. Now, this was a place just 42 miles north of Jerusalem. It would take about 2 days to get there, but the differences were more than geographic. There were ideological, cultural differences between the two cities that was far greater than just the geographic distance. See, many years ago, around 930 BC, the kingdom of Israel split in two. The northern kingdom, which retained the name Israel, had the capital city as Samaria, and they were assimilated into the Assyrian Empire. Now, this was a people that was different. This was a people that was different, and Jesus said, make sure they know too. Jesus is asking them to spread the good news to people who were not like them. And every country, every nation has people who are not quite like us. Part of your partnership with Hope International has been serving in the nation of Burundi. And in Burundi, there is a group called the Batwa. It is a group that is seen as marginalized. They are seen as not like the rest of us. They are marginalized. They are put to the side. And I love that churches in Burundi say, no. This good news, it is to reach the Batwa too. Let's go serve. In the nation of Ukraine, where Hope International was founded, the people there is called the Roma. Derogatorily referred to as the gypsies. And the church in Ukraine says, no, those people, that's our Samaria. We want to make sure we reach them too. In Dominican Republic, it oftentimes is reading the Haitian immigrants. For all of us, there are those that are a little bit different, living in relative close proximity. And Jesus is saying, don't miss out on the opportunity to reach them too. And then there was the final part of Jesus' command, to be his witnesses. Where? To the ends of the earth, exactly. And is it possible that when Jesus said, Jerusalem, Samaria, and the ends of the earth, is it possible that that's not a multiple choice question? Is it possible that it's not an either or approach? Is it possible that Jesus is inviting us to say, let's choose option E, all of the above? And perhaps that grows a little bit easier when we remember who we are in the context of Jesus' original teaching. We're not the original apostles. We were not in Jerusalem. In Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the ends of the earth, who are we? We're part of the ends of the earth, and I am so grateful that a group of people, the early believers, answered the call of Jesus to what? To go global. Consistently, beginning and end, God's heart is for all nations. And I believe we are invited into that, to say, yes, let's meet the needs in our community. Yes, let's meet the needs in those surrounding areas. And let's not miss out on the opportunity to also reach the ends of the earth. So the first thing that I wonder is what would happen if we as a people rediscovered our global mission? Second thing that I wonder about is what would happen if we expanded the toolbox? If our first error perhaps is thinking too small about our mandate, perhaps the second is thinking too small about the tools. Now, growing up, my father was a pastor in Massachusetts, and I loved hearing from missionaries. We would have missionaries that would come in and they would share incredible things. But oftentimes it was church planting and it was medical missions. And those two did not feel like they were in alignment fully with how God had wired me. I was not a pastor, and I certainly was not a medical professional. In fact, coming here today, I was thinking about the very first trip that I took with Willowdale Chapel. Went to Congo, and as we were about to land, there was a video that was being shown on the monitor, and this video was showing the movie The Incredible Hulk. And in that, there was a shot with needles. And did I mention I don't do medical stuff super well? As we're showing this, I literally passed out. Literally, they almost did a forced landing. My poor friends from Willowdale saw their fearless leader passed out on the floor in that. And I think you thought, what are we doing partnering with that guy and this organization? I've never been drawn to medical missions whatsoever. I found myself drawn to entrepreneurship. I found myself thinking about business and entrepreneurship. And I'm so grateful that I was invited into saying, how might God use those skills of business, finance, entrepreneurship in reaching all nations for Jesus? Earlier this year, I traveled to Ukraine. I wanted to bring encouragement to our team that is there, that has consistently been serving throughout the invasion. And there is the Ukrainian churches on the move. But the standout moment for me was when I met Artem and Alina. These two individuals that have chosen to stay in Ukraine to be part of a response and what the church is doing in Ukraine. And they got a loan from Hope International to buy a generator so they could have electricity, so they could stay open. They're providing employment for internally displaced people. They are having an incredible impact on the local community and reaching their community for Christ. And there is revival happening in Ukraine right now, and it is powerful. But the thing that struck me is Artem almost missed this. Because he said, initially, when he became a follower of Jesus, he thought that meant he had to join the choir at his church. That was the model that was held up. But Artem said, but singing was not necessarily my gifting. And his wife at that moment leaned over and said, it's true, he's really not good on that. But he was gifted with this gift of business. And is it possible that God might use a Ukrainian restaurant owner to be part of this unfolding plan? And if that is true there, might that also be true for us? What are the gifts? What are the abilities that we have been given? And is it possible that every single gift, every single place of work might just be possible in this good news of Jesus reaching Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the ends of the earth? And the third question that I wonder about is what would happen if we paid attention to the most vulnerable? You know, the Great Commission says to teach them to obey everything that I commanded you. Everything. So that means we don't get to just choose and pick, but just a few chapters earlier from Matthew 28 and Matthew 25, Jesus shares a story about sheep and goats. And the punchline is, I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you invited me in. I needed clothes and you clothed me. I was sick and you looked after me. I was in prison and you came to visit me. But they're so confused. They don't remember doing that. When did we do that? And Jesus' response is, we know this. Whatever you did for the least of these, my brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. In Matthew 25, care for the vulnerable is a sign of a heart that has been transformed by Christ. Think about this. As a father of four of my kids, I would question the sincerity of anyone who said they love me and ignored the needs of my children who are in real need and suffering. Our love for our Father compels us to care for his children, regardless of where they are found. Care for the vulnerable is inseparable from our faith. So 3 simple questions this morning. What would happen if we rediscovered our global mission? What would happen if we expanded the toolbox? And what would happen if we paid particular attention to the most vulnerable? Now, I phrase these as what would happen if, but they're not just what would happen if statements. They're also what happened when statements. Because when I read the book of Acts, when I read about a church that was on the move, when I read about a world that was turned upside down in the way that 12 cowering individuals in a room that have the door locked set the world on fire, I think about these 3 elements, and that described them too. The first thing that they did is they accepted that global mission. You know, Acts chapter 1:14 suggests that several months after the crucifixion, there's 120 Christians. Acts 4:4 says that number grew to 5,000. Acts 21:20 says there were many thousands of believing Jews in Jerusalem. And it wasn't just Jerusalem. The apostles went global, and the world was transformed. You know how we can know this? Because we can look at where they actually finished their race. Where were they when they died? And yes, persecution pushed them, but they also accepted the invitation to go and reach all nations. A map of the locations where the 12 apostles of Christ died says they were on the move. Yes, they were fueled by persecution, but they were taking the message of Jesus global. And you can look at a map and you can see that they had already accepted this call to go global. Second thing that they did is they used every tool that was available to them. The church advanced when everyone said, what has God given me and how can I use that in the mission? You know, Barnabas was in real estate. Anyone in real estate? Aquila and Priscilla, business owners, Paul, tent maker, Lydia, artisan, Luke, physician, Dionysius, a judge, Erastus, a government worker, all of them involved. No one got a pass. So this idea that there only is a few tools that might be necessary to reach all nations, to continue to share the good news of Jesus, that is just not true. The world was turned on fire when everyone said, what are my gifts? What are my abilities? How can I use that? And the third is they paid particular attention to the most vulnerable. You know the last recorded conversation with Paul and Peter, when Paul decides that he's going to focus on the Jews and Gentiles, and Peter's going to focus on the Jews. The last recorded conversation that they have is this, that they remember the poor. And then Paul responds, that's the very thing I was eager to do. They paid attention. When there was famine, the Macedonian church responded. The early church was so famous for its care for the poor that the Roman Emperor Julian, who was certainly no fan of Christians, said this. He begrudgingly recognized that our pagan priests neglect the poor. He said this, the hated Galileans devote themselves to works of charity. They cared for the poor. They cared for the vulnerable. So these are not just what would happen if statements. We see the world was turned on upside down once, And I can't help but wonder, like in our day, in our time, like what would happen if we did that again? What would happen if we rediscovered this call, all people, all nations, let's go? What would happen if we did it in such a way that everyone said, what are my gifts and what are my abilities? Let's use them in advancing the kingdom. And what would happen if, as we did that, we paid particular attention to the most marginalized, the most vulnerable? I believe this happened once. I believe this is happening again, and I don't want to miss out on it.